Is that cool or what? Yeah, I love that too. Oh, wow, look at all this. It didn't even all make it in the bucket. Here we go. I'll set this over here. Whoever is in charge of that, that's where it is. Okay. Here it is. I got one thing I want you to hear me say this morning. This is it. He is risen. There's a lot of things I don't know. There's a lot of things I'm absolutely unsure about. But here's the one thing that I know that I'm absolutely sold on. Jesus Christ, sacrifice for you, sacrifice for me, sacrifice for all of humanity, has been raised from the grave. Praise God, absolutely. I'm going to tell you, that's what and some of you are thinking, I know what you're thinking. Last week was Easter. It's not this week. Last week was Easter. I know that. Last week was a wonderful week that we celebrated as we began with the sunrise service. Over 100 folks were out there. It was a great time of celebration as we looked at the sacrifice of Jesus, giving us that clear indication that He loves us. And once again, a lot of things I may not know, but I know this: He loves me, and He loves you, and He loves everybody in this world, right? He wants everyone to have the blessing that He offers to humanity. That's just it. Then we came back at about 7:30 that morning and we had breakfast together. A lot of you guys were here, a big gathering of breakfast. We had a lot of guests that were with us and all of that. And I couldn't be in all of that because it's Sunday morning and I had lots of responsibilities. I couldn't do that. Oh, I know. Poor Mark, right? He got so much on his shoulders. There you are. But I stuck my head in several times. And you know what? Let me tell you what I observed right off the bat. Noise. So much noise coming out of that room. We had, there was almost 500 folks there for the whole morning there, or actually over 500 folks for the whole morning. And so there was all this noise that was coming out of that room. And the main noise that I heard was laughter. Now, let me tell you what people who study people, let me tell you what they say. They say laughter is a huge indicator of some things that are going on. Did you know that you laugh more when you're with other people than you do when you're by yourself? Did you know that? I've observed that about myself before. I may laugh out loud by myself, but when I'm with people, I laugh a whole lot more. And people that study that say that about half, in other words, you increase your laugh quotient by about half, 50% higher when you're with people, and you'll laugh about things that are not discernibly funny in any kind of way, in any kind of measure. When you're with people, you just laugh. You know what it's a sign of? It's an indicator of bonding and coming together. There's something about being together and putting our feet under the same table and looking at each other eyeball to eyeball that just draws us together. And then we came together and we had our worship hour when we looked at, here's this business, here's our lives. We're so messed up. It's not that we mess up. We're just messed up, right? And we've lost our innocence, and there's something happened in our lives that we began to hide things from other people, even from ourselves. There's some things about ourselves we don't want to think about. Sin is our problem, but Jesus Christ is the answer. He is the sin bearer. And because of Him, we are able to lay our burdens down at the cross. Last week we had the cross erected right here in the middle of the room, where it ought to be, in the middle of our stuff, right? And there was a chain in everybody's seat, and you had a little piece of paper to it, and you could write down the burdens, the things that burdened you, the things that kept you, the chains that bound you up. We heard a testimony from Harriet Smith that I still think about, the things that have gone on in her life recently, from her mother that she's now caring for with dementia or Alzheimer's, the loss of her husband about a year ago, and the murder of her son, and the things that all of that brings, all that she feels from that, and how she's able to take that and lay it at the cross. And then we all together took our little chains with the things that we'd written on there, and we laid it down at the foot of the cross. And then we went and took the Lord's Supper that the elders and their wives were ministering to us at various places around the auditorium. And let me tell you what I noticed through all of that. I noticed that the mood, as people were coming to lay their chains down at the cross, the mood was pretty somber, pretty sobering. And then when they typically left the cross and began to go to the Lord's Supper, the mood elevated. It was more of a celebration. They were just coming together. It was an exciting moment. It was a great thing to see and a great thing to be a part of, as we literally kind of lived out that sacrifice of Jesus and what it means to us personally, right? And then we ended with this whole notion that we're here to send it. We got a message to share with the world, right? That's what we talked about last week. Now look, we don't talk about the resurrection every Sunday. At the same time, every Sunday is about the resurrection, isn't it? Absolutely. Whether we're celebrating the Lord's Supper or it's just the fact, that's who we are. The resurrection of Jesus from the dead is the thing that makes us kingdom people. We've accepted that. We live in that truth. I mean, it's just incredible. Now, I didn't quite get it out of my system last week, in case you guys couldn't tell, all right? I couldn't quite get it out of all out of my system, so I want us to spend a little time this morning. Last week was a really personal, subjective, I'm going to lay my sin down, right? Symbolically, yeah, but there was something that sort of happened through all of that, right? This morning is a little more objective. It's kind of an analytical look at the resurrection, because, see, here's the question. Did he really rise from the dead? And how do you know that? Now, most of the people that you meet every day, they got serious questions about that. And they doubt that. And it's kind of a critical piece to be doubting, because let me tell you the honest truth, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is a cold, hard, bare, paradigm-shifting, irritating, yet you can't ignore it fact. And somehow or another we've got to come to grips with that, and we want people to come to grips with that, right? And so most of the folks that you come into contact with, while they believe in Jesus, that He actually lived, that He actually died, that He actually was raised from the dead, so we want to spend a little time looking at that. Let me tell you a little something about Karen just for a second. And I mean this in a really complimentary way. I know I mess around with her sometimes from up here. I'll do anything for a laugh sometimes. You know how I am, so there you are. But this is not for that. Karen is, you don't have to confuse her with the facts. Okay, facts don't make, if she believes something, it's because she chooses to do that. Now, she's got her own little schedule of things that comprise what it takes to believe a thing. But it's not my same kind of schedule. I'm more skeptical than that. By nature, I'm more skeptical. In fact, if it wasn't for the indwelling Spirit, if it wasn't for Jesus Christ in my life, I would be beyond skeptical. I'd be cynical. And probably not a whole lot of fun, to be around. I got to see more. And I realize that we walk by faith and not by sight. Yet at the same time, what we believe is based upon God. It's based upon something that's reasonable. God says, let's reason together. Let's think about this. And so He doesn't look for me to make some blind leap, right? What is the evidence that would support that? Now listen, we're not going to talk about all the evidence, okay? That's kind of, we're just not going to do that. In fact, let me tell you, we don't have time to do all that. Josh McDowell once made the observation, I think I've shared this with you before, that there's more court-admissible evidence for the resurrection of Jesus from the dead than there is court-admissible evidence that Julius Caesar even lived. Think about that just for a second. What I want us to focus on here just for a minute is the eyewitness testimony, because here's the most convincing proofs, the most convincing evidence. It is those eyewitness reports. We're not going to look at all of them, but we're going to look at one of them. Luke 24. So get your Bible out or your electronic, whatever it is, and let's look at Luke 24 just for a second. There's some stuff there that I just want you to know. I want you to have confidence about what you believe, confidence in the things that you might share with other people about the resurrection, because it's in there, okay? Now look, that's not the only record of eyewitness accounts of the resurrection. Matthew has one. It's in Matthew 28. Mark has one. It's in Mark chapter 16. John has it. It's in John chapter 20 and 21. Luke's is in Luke chapter 24. Now here's something you're going to observe. And don't get all shook up about this, but here's what you're going to observe. That those eyewitness accounts do not all say the same thing. You look at them and they're kind of different. They have a different sort of take on things. And some people said, that's not really, hey, hang on a second. That's one of the indicators of an eyewitness account, guys. Because it's this perspective and that perspective and this perspective and that perspective. You get 10 people together to witness an accident and they're not going to all say the same thing. But the basic facts are going to be the same. That's what you have in those accounts. That's why Matthew talks about soldiers that were standing there like dead men and other guys don't talk about it. Right? Or John says that John and Peter went back to the tomb to stick their heads inside and see what's going on. Luke just says Peter went. It's not that they didn't both go. It's not that they're just reporting from a different kind of perspective, which indicates that what we're talking about here is eyewitness account. Don't let go of that, folks. This is not just something or other that kind of kicks up in the air, and it's not some legend, something or other that was produced, some dogma that is laid out there so everybody can believe. These are eyewitness accounts. Okay. Now, when you look in Luke 24, there are 4 scenes. The first scene starts in verse 1, goes down through about verse 12, and it's the resurrection itself. Just let your eyes kind of drift down through that. It's the resurrection itself, and at the tomb. And you got some women that have gone. They brought spices there because they want to continue preparation for the body because everything was rushed. Right? It was a high feast day, and so they wanted to come back and further prepare the body. Only thing they found out was no body. The body was not there. And they saw, Luke describes them as men who looked like they gleamed like lightning, and it just lets you know they were not from those parts. Okay? And so they knew exactly. They fell down and they worshiped. And the guy said, "What are you doing here? Looking for him in this garden of the dead. He's not here. He's risen. Just like he said he would." And then the angels quote some things that Jesus had said, or they talk about some things that Jesus had said. And the women said, "Oh, he did say that. He did say that." Now see here, I just want you to know this, right? If you're making up a story to convince everybody about things, you don't have those kinds of glitches in the story, right? The resurrection from the dead, we need to be easier on the people that we interact with, because that's a hard thing to accept. And here they are, and they heard Jesus talk about his resurrection. They heard him say it, but it didn't click. You know why? Because nobody comes back from the dead. Nobody walks out of that room. And maybe they thought he was speaking metaphorically. Maybe they thought it was just kind of some sort of figurative something. But here's the deal. He said, just like he said. He's not here, just like he said. And then they remembered that. Oh, but it didn't quite completely click. When they got the news, they run back. They tell the other disciples. Look at verse 11. Those other disciples, they heard what the women were saying, and it sounded like a bunch of nonsense. You know what? Accepting the resurrection is not an easy thing. I want you to know, nothing was laid down here. They struggled with it just like everybody else struggles with it. They thought, you know why? Because dead people don't come back. There's a mark of an eyewitness account. It seemed like nonsense to them. And then, look at verse 13. No, or verse 12. Well, it's one of those two. Look it up yourself. Here you go. Peter runs back to the tomb. He looks inside. He sees everything the way that it is. And he comes back and notice what it says. He wondered to himself what this might mean. That was Peter. He wasn't told. It's just like, what? There's got to be some other explanation. So there he is, scene 1, the tomb. Scene 2 is the road to Emmaus. Clopas or Cleopas or Clopas, I may call him anything this morning, but he and another disciple are moving from Jerusalem to Emmaus, about 7 miles away, and it says in the text that they're downcast. Now, by the way, this is the same day as the resurrection. 1,986 years ago, give or take, allowances for shifts and calendars and that sort of thing. 1,986 years ago, last Sunday, these guys are on the road from Jerusalem to Emmaus, and they're having a conversation about what's going on. And Jesus is there. He appears there on the road, and they don't recognize him at first, right? And he says, "What are you guys talking about?" And Clopas says, "What are you? You've been under a rock? You visited? You don't realize what's been going on here the last several days?" And Jesus says, "What things?" They still don't recognize him, right? Jesus says, "What things?" And so Clopas opens his mouth, and they both begin to talk, I guess. And they begin to tell him, well, this man, a prophet. Now notice how limited they were, even at that point in their viewpoint of who Jesus was. Is he a prophet? Is Jesus Christ a prophet? Yeah. But he's way more than a prophet, isn't he? But they called him a prophet, and they said he came, he did these incredible things, talking about the miracles. He had these incredible words that he spoke, and the chief priests and the Jewish leadership killed him. They didn't blame it on the Romans, they blamed it on God's own people, which is pretty ironic, isn't it? They had him put to death, and he said, we thought he was going to redeem Israel. We thought our hope was in him. We really thought it was going to be. And even at that, our women told us this morning that the tomb was empty. They had a vision of angels, and the tomb was empty. See, they couldn't quite get a hold of it. Right? There's evidence of an eyewitness account. They're not pasting anything over. There you are. There you are. Finally, Jesus reveals himself to them. They recognize him. They run back and they tell all the apostles. Scene 3 starts in verse 36. Scene 3, the room. They're in a room there in Jerusalem, and Cleopas and the other guy, they're downloading what they saw when Jesus appears in their midst. By the way, these basic parts are in all the eyewitness accounts. Some of the details are different because eyewitnesses see different things, right? One of the marks of it. It's one of the indicators. But all the basic parts are the same. They're in this room. Jesus appears and says, "Peace be with you." And anything but peace ensued. Notice what it says. These guys they are frightened, they are startled, and they think they've seen a ghost. I want you to know something. I don't believe in ghosts. That's me. I don't. But I would believe in ghosts before I believe that a man came back from the dead. See, they just couldn't get their heads around this. Look at the honesty of this account. They said, "There's no way!" And Jesus says, "Hey, look at those verses." I think we got it on your screen. He says, "Look, why did doubts pop up? Look. Hey, put your finger right here in the holes. I'm not a ghost. I'm flesh and blood real. And give me a piece of that broiled fish." I don't think the message there is that he's just really hungry, right? He wants them to see that he's real, that it's legitimate, that this is it. And then he makes this statement. I tell you, all of this had to be fulfilled, what was said in the Psalms and in Moses and in the prophets. Just let your eyes drift down that context. Maybe that's on the screen. And I want you to see all of that. I want you to know that because I am a fulfillment. Listen, do you know what that means? You know what that really means? The only way to understand the Old Testament, the key to understanding the Old Testament, is the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Nothing makes sense. It all comes together when you see the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. That's what the Psalms are about. It's what the prophets are about. It's what Moses... Now, I don't mean every verse is about that, right? Some verses are about Hezekiah. Some verses are about Jezebel. Some verses may be about... But here's the message. Here it is. It's about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It is the significant event in history. And he says, "I want you guys to go out and share it." That's what he says to them. Scene 4. It's the mountain. The Mount of Ascension. He blesses them, and it says there he worships them. Now, look, guys, here we are. Bear with me just for a second. We went through the chapter. There's some themes here that come out of this chapter. And I just kind of want to talk about those themes a little bit. Take a look at your screen. There's 4 themes that come out of this chapter. One is the resurrection is an earth-shattering historical event. And they've witnessed it, right? Here's the thing about, in some respects, Christianity is the toughest religion in the world because you've got to believe something so bizarre. Right? The purpose of Luke 24, one of the main themes is this is an historical event. It happened. It happened. It's a fact. Facts can be, they can be tough to take, you guys. But there it is. You got to do something with it, right? Second theme, the resurrection is the key to understanding all of Scripture. I mentioned that just a little bit. I won't say any more about that. Number 3, the resurrection is a powerful message to all people. I said something about that last week. I want to just kind of kick that around just a little bit. You guys up for it? Is everybody up for it? Here's the 4th. I don't know. Are you up for it? Okay. Here's the 4th thing. The resurrection says that Jesus is the true King. It just says true there. It's a true King. All right? We'll say just a word or two about that. Now let's look at that first one. It is an historical event. It actually happened. Now, do you know how, folks that want to believe in Jesus and they say, yes, he was a prophet, he was all of that, but he was killed. They believe that the resurrection itself was actually made up by the 2nd century church or the 3rd century church. They had to make up stories to give concrete stories, something a little more that you can get your head around, to communicate these eternal truths. Right? That Jesus didn't really raise from the dead. By the way, these are not just secular folks. There's a large segment of Christianity, kind of on the, if you kind of go from left to right, liberal to conservative, way on pretty much the liberal side, they say this didn't really happen. Didn't really happen. This was written 100 years, maybe more than that, after the events took place, not because they took place, but to help communicate these eternal truths. Jesus wasn't really raised from the dead, but we'll tell that story to communicate the eternal truth that there's always hope. There's always hope. Right? Didn't really happen, but there's always hope. And Peter never had that conversation with Jesus in John chapter 21. Where he had denied Jesus before the rooster crowed 3 times. And he said, I never blankety blank knew the blankety blank man. What are you talking about? And then Jesus and Peter's eyes meet, and he goes off and he weeps. He needed to be reinstated. John 21 talks about that, where Jesus asks him 3 times, do you love me, dude? Do you love me? He said, you know I like you. He uses a different word for love. Then feed my sheep. 3 times they go through that. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? They said that didn't really happen, but they tell that story so it communicates this higher truth of forgiveness. So here's the deal. So I'm supposed to believe that these guys went and faced death over some sort of something that didn't really happen. Does that make sense to you guys? There's a fellow named Cronin who is a New Testament scholar, and he makes this. Here's a quote. He says, "Emmaus never happened. The road to Emmaus never happened. Semicolon. Emmaus always happens." Meaning, it wasn't a real historical thing, but anytime you have an encounter with Jesus, here you go. And the notion is that these guys were so distraught when Jesus died. They were so undone, they began to kind of collect themselves, and they began to say, well, you know what? He's really still with us. You know what? My dad died 6 years ago. My mother died a year ago, and I still have a sense from time to time that they're with me. You know, their words still guide me. I understand that. Do you understand that? Right? So they said, he's really still with us, but all of those things did not really occur. Now look, y'all, when you look at Luke 24, does that even make sense? Here are eyewitness accounts. For example, look at the scene 3, the upper room. Jesus appears and says, peace be with you, and they go nuts. And he says, put your fingers in the holes in my hands and in my feet. Give me a piece of fish to eat. Let me ask you a question. What higher truth is that supposed to project? Let me tell you what it's supposed to project. That I am not just a symbol. That the resurrection is not just something. It is an actual, I am here. I am here. Put your hands, put your finger right there. Absolutely. I'm here. And look at these women. These women that go to the tomb. They're going to see what's going on. They're going to put spices on the body and all of that sort of thing. So they go back and they come back with this story that Jesus had been raised. They are the first ones to witness. Right? Women. Now, let me tell you something. Women were nobodies in the first century. I mean, they had snake belly status. Y'all hear what I'm saying? In fact, let me tell you the honest truth. Their testimony was inadmissible in Roman jurisprudence. You couldn't get a testimony from a woman. Their testimony was inadmissible in Jewish jurisprudence. Testimony of a woman didn't count. And yet, you're going to fabricate a story that says the very first ones were women? How does that even help the plausibility of your case? Why would they say that? Because it happened. It's an eyewitness account. This actually happened. And did you notice? He names the women in the first 12 verses. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James. Names those women, he says, and others. And Clopas, he's named. Why are they named? I want you to know something about first century testimony. Naming people was like footnotes. You know, you read something technical and it gives you a footnote and says, go back and check this source if you want to know more information. People's names were footnotes indicating those people were still alive. If you want to know something about this, go ask them yourself. Same thing Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15. He appeared to over 500 folks. Go talk to them. Eyewitness accounts right there on the spot. If you want to know more, go see these people. They were there. They are the eyewitness people to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But verse 52, hang on just a second. What time is it? Because I don't have my phone with me. What time is it? Oh, come on. What? It's 10. Okay, so I'm going to be done here real quick. Okay. No, I'm serious. I'm serious. No, I'm serious about that. Look at verse 52. It says it says that these guys, as he ascends, they worship him. Now think about that just for a second. If there's anybody in this world that is not going to worship a man, it's going to be an Orthodox Jew. I mean, they wouldn't even say God's name out loud. They wouldn't even write it. They put a few words down there. Today, Orthodox Jews, they don't say God. They don't write God. They go G-D. Because of the holiness of God and the highness of God. They're not about to worship a man. What in the world? They fall down and worship this guy? Why? Because they saw something. They saw something that forever changed them. Do you know how changes occur in a culture? There's a book by a fellow named Collins. Tim Keller is a fellow that kind of opened up my eyes to this, called Sociology of Philosophy. I don't have time to tell you about this, but let me just tell you this. He talks about how cultures change. Every culture has a core value, right? In America, we got core values that make us Americans, right? Same thing for Germany, India, ancient civilizations, whatever it is. Everybody's got their deal, right? And they're held together by these core truths and values. But then there are people that Collins calls outliers. These are the people that are they're looking at the stuff in the middle and they say, I don't know that I really believe that. Here's what I think, and it's something different from what's in the center. And guess what the response is? Everybody says, boo, throw the bum out, kill him. That's not right. That's not what we're about. Okay? But then there's a few people in there that say, no, wait a second. Maybe it's a little bit true. Well, what happens is that guy right there has redefined the center. And over time, people begin to say, well, I'm not right at the center. I'm not where that guy is, but I'm somewhere in between. And over about a generation or a couple of generations, a culture shifts. Do you realize these guys are falling down and worshiping? Luke points this out in the next book he writes, Acts chapter 1, only 40 days after they saw something. Same thing with Paul. He's killing Christians, you guys. Because the temple and the sacrifices, this is our identity. This is who we are. And there's no way he's going all over the known world, hauling Christians down and killing them until he sees the resurrected Jesus as one untimely born. And then all of a sudden, did he agree with everything, do you think? Did he agree with everything? I don't know, but I'm going to tell you what. Jesus Christ is raised, and nothing else matters. Maybe I'm still hungry for maybe I still want to hang on to the side. Jesus Christ has been raised, nothing else matters. And there may be a lot of things that you may not understand about Christianity. There's a lot of things I don't. Seriously. There may be stuff that you don't really particularly like. I mean, think about the ethics of Christianity. Think about what Jesus says about sex. Are you kidding me in this culture that we're in? Well, okay, let me tell you what. If you accept the notion that Jesus Christ is raised, nothing else matters. Jesus Christ is King. He came back from the dead. It solidifies every claim that he makes. So all of that stuff comes into life. Jesus Christ is the true King. And he tells me, y'all, that I have a future. I talked about this last week. I'm just going to say something real quickly here. A lot of our folks here in America believe that, when you're dead, you're like Rover and dead all over, right? Probably because, it's easier that way. We don't have to live by rules because when it's done, there you are. I mean, I don't know. I'm not trying to look into people's heads. I don't know. Again, I said a little bit about this last week. Hang with me. That's not new with the 21st century folks. Right? A fellow named Epicurus. Have you ever heard of him? He's a great Greek philosopher. Great in the sense that he had a big following. The Epicureans. These were the guys that said, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. He said, they know there's nothing after death. You're like Rover, dead all over. There's no sensation. There's no pain. There's nothing to be afraid of. Nothing you're going to feel. I guess he got that because you kick a body and the body wouldn't move and he'd say, see, that's it. There's nothing here. Epicurus is the guy that really started that idea. Okay. Now, let me tell you a little bit of history. Common everyday people back in those days, they didn't really buy into that. You know why? Same reason you don't. There's a sense inside of you that there's more. You can't even perceive of non-existence. Can't even think about it. It's something that's in our DNA. And so those people said, even the Jews, when you read the Old Testament, and they talk about life after death, it's a pretty shadowy kind of thing. What is this all about? And then even in Jesus' time, the Pharisees believed in some kind of resurrection. The Sadducees didn't believe in a resurrection. It's pretty unclear that they even thought of anything after death. But Jesus comes back and says, here it is. It's real. It's real. I'm not a speck of dust being blown about by the wind. I'm not a rock sinking to the bottom of a cold, dark sea. Some people will say, yeah, that's right. Non-existence is not the thing. But here's the thing. When you die, you become a part of the soul of the cosmos. I talked about that last week. Let me touch back on it just for a second. The soul of the cosmos. You don't have any identity. There's nothing personal about that. But you always are here. You're in the earth and the wind and the fire and the water. You know, what did we say? What was that? The Lion King thing? Circle of life, fertilizer for the future. There's somehow you're here, but it's not personal. Now, something about that. And people say, don't be afraid of death because you still... That terrifies me. You know why it terrifies me? Because any thinking person will realize, wait a second. The most important thing to me in this world is love. Loving people and being loved. Love and being loved. And somehow or another that all goes away. It doesn't matter. It doesn't count. The message of Jesus is we're involved in the Holy Spirit of God and in the love of God and in the love of Jesus and all of that. Then Jesus comes back and says, let me tell you what. It is personal and it is real. It is yours. Listen, there it is. There's that evidence. There's that stuff that says this is significant. This is something that happened. So look, you know what? If you've still got, look, here's an opportunity. Come share it with your elders. I'm going to ask the elders and their wives if they would to kind of get about the room. And we're just going to sing our way out of this. Thanks be to God. Our chains are gone. Amen. Let's stand together as we sing.
My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior, has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow. The sun forbear to shine.